A gentle rain fell on the city, refreshing the streets and parks. Fell on the city, refreshing the streets and parks. Fell on the city, refreshing the streets and parks.
Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 112th live stream for the Misfit Gamer Studios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. In today's episode, we are going to be doing a deep dive into the history of Bard class. It's a very fascinating deep dive that I got to do. I found out a lot of really interesting information, and I was even able to get so much information that I wasn't going to be able to cover on this stream that I already have next week's topic, but we'll get into that once I dive in. Sorry for the late start. Been dealing with some background stuff. Apparently, I can't get the TTS working for channel points, which is an absolute shame because I had two versions of it, and I just can't get them to play. Everything is working on my end. I have everything plugged in right, and it's just not working. So I am going to disable those, but give me just a moment. I'm not quite done. I just wanted to pop in real quick and just get the stream started. But I do have to go grab a drink and get everything else set up. But otherwise, we are ready to go. Already saw Cosmic. I see Hecate's lurking, which is awesome. Yeah, just sit back, enjoy the music. I don't know why TTS isn't working, but we have added a whole bunch of stuff. Bits badges are out there, sub badges are out there, and a whole bunch of new stuff in the channel points. We should even have the new channel point logo up and running. The XP icon is now down there next to XP that you guys are gaining. So it's actually coming together. It's a lot of fun building all of this. But yeah, take a look through the points. Check out what we got. I will be back in just a second. And you know what? I even have. I'll just do the right. Yeah, I'll be right back. All right, and we're back. Yeah, so I have no idea what's going on with this text-to-speech. I thought that was going to be a really fun add-on for people who had stuck around for a while and wanted to get some stuff out. But yeah, I can't get it to queue out. All of the other sound alerts seem to be working, at least the other ones that I tested, but I just can't figure out what's going on with that. So I will learn how to figure that out, and then we'll get things properly figured out and figured out. I don't know, because yeah, sound alerts is in the moderation chat. I know it's properly set up, and I was able to queue off the other one, so it must just be on their end. There must be some sort of an issue with like TTS specifically, and there might be a setting that I've missed, but it's pretty straightforward, so I'm gonna have to look at that another time. So I'm not worried about that. I'm excited about today's topic. I have other updates for y'all as well. What's going on, Cosmic? Oh yeah, your Tuesday group. Rescue party. Interesting. Walls blocked out detect magic. Interesting. That's an interesting call. I'm not sure I buy that, but I mean, I guess depending upon like the setting that you're in, I guess you could say that like certain rocks have like anti-magical properties, but that would be, yeah, I'm not really sure. I would make that same call, but that's just, a small amount of information. So let's see. So updates. Yes. So I have been working on a couple other projects that I'm going to be releasing here over the next couple months. As we keep talking about, we are doing more and more as we're trying to find more ways to get through things. And aside from like some larger, bigger projects that won't be coming around the corner anytime soon, one thing that I do want to ping the community for here really quickly, or not really quickly, but here in the near future. So if you are part of the Discord, or if you want to be, type Discord in the chat and then get the link. You guys can join our Discord. And I will be pinging our Discord community here soon because I need some ideas, guys. So I have an entire, I'm looking at it right now, I don't know what to call that, like one of those extra large shopping bags, like the huge ones, not the canvas, but like they're just like huge shopping bags. We use it as an old game bag because it could hold like entire like larger rectangular board games in it, and it's entirely full of Magic cards. And the majority of them are, if I remember correctly, the majority of them are from a very old what do they call them, blocks. Oh my god, it's been that long. It's an old block called Gate Crash. I think it was 2013, 2012, 2013. So it's super old, but I have to go through the entire thing, and I want to do this like on stream, but I have to go through because I have hundreds. I probably have, well, at least dozens. I have dozens, if not hundreds, of unopened booster packs. And I have no idea what to do with them because I'm not into Magic like I used to be. I just can't keep up with, a new block every couple months. But I have a bunch of these cards and I don't know what to do with them. I don't know if it would be worth like opening them up on stream. I don't know if it would be worth, just doing a weird stream where I like look up like, the prices online and we just try to have, like a fun, like, almost kind of like a kind of like, what am I thinking? What's the word? What is the word I'm looking for? Almost like a fundraiser kind of concept where I try to sell them and like raise money for the stream. So this is why I'm bad. I have no idea what to do with these. I have so many, and I'm just like, what do I do with hundreds and hundreds? I mean, I have so many Magic cards in general, and I don't know what to do with them. Like, it would be kind of cool to. I thought about doing streams where we could put together a deck, like with chat. But the problem with that is, like, again, all of my stuff's outdated at this point. All of my cards are at least 10 years old now. So none of them are active, valid cards anymore. Most of them are probably not in great condition. So yeah. So I need advice on that. So I am going to be pinging the Discord soon and trying to get some ideas for that. As well as... the sidekick challenge. So Kage and I came up with this interesting idea that we want to do for a unique stream because we've been really enjoying the history ofs, and I haven't done like a high point origin in a while or any high point details. But specifically, I want to start doing some unique and other content. Sorry, I have like one of those like hairs in my mustache that is like poking straight up into my nose, and it's absolutely driving me insane. But I want to do some more different types of streams where we get challenged a little bit more than just what we do on Homebrew Review, and a little bit more than what I do when I just read through some of the books and read through a bunch of forums to find some information, right? So what I want to do is we came up with this idea called a sidekick challenge, where we want to start taking iconic sidekicks from different medium, right? So whether it's books, TV, movies, video games, we want to take classic and iconic sidekicks, and we basically want to translate them into their D&D counterparts. So as true to form as we can, as true to form as we can, as strong or as weak as they are, we want to put all of these sidekicks through essentially like a gauntlet, almost like a tournament style fight, where we tier them all up, and either they do like 2v2 battles, or they just do 1v1s, or they do a free for all. But we want to do that to where like chat can control one side, Kage and I will control the other, or it's like Kage versus chat and I'm DMing it, something along those lines, to where we can have a lot more fun than just, because I know that there are YouTubers out there and there are other content creators who just do the transition, right? You take a pop culture character, turn it into a D&D build, and make a play, a character sheet out of it. Like we've all seen that before. I want to do something a little bit different, though. I want something a little bit more interactive. So instead of just building it out and showing you what I've done, I want to do that not only on stream, but then we want to test them out. We actually want to like put them up against each other, and from a D&D point of view, look at which sidekick is truly the strongest, because we did talk about doing like heroes and other pop culture references like the Marvel DC universe. But I think sidekicks is the one I want to do first, because I think sidekicks would kick off into a much more fun conversation, because then you're not just looking for the obvious overpowered superheroes. You're not just looking for the ones that have the easy translatable powers. When you think of sidekicks, a lot of them you're going to have to get more creative on what do they bring to the table and how does that relate to D&D. So I'm super excited to do that one. That one I think is going to be one of my more favorite projects, but we need a good list of iconic sidekicks. I don't know how many I want to do. Maybe at first we'll at least do 20. Like that's going to be a lot, but I'd at least like to try to get something down to where we have enough to make a good tournament. We don't want like 6 or 7. We want like a good chunk. So I'm going to be pinging the Discord for those as well. What I'm probably going to do is in the topic sections, either that or I might make a new channel where I'm pinging chat, like where specifically I'm pinging the community for input. But I do have another one. This one's going to be a little bit more future down the road because I have to finish the Misfit Gamers Tavern. But once I do have the tavern finished, one of the things I need from the community is D&D cocktails, like either known D&D cocktails that you guys know of, or in-game D&D cocktails that you've heard of, or cocktails that you think would make a good D&D cocktail, right? Like I basically, once I have the tavern done, we know we're going to do board games. We know we're going to test out new TTRPGs. We know we're going to play High Point. We'll live stream so much in there once I have everything figured out. But I want to also be able to use the actual corner bar. Like I want to do a little bit of content there. It's not going to be a lot of the time, but having something like people be able to submit to us a D&D drink, and then like say if we're playing D&D all night and we're streaming it and we want to take a quick break, I can move the cameras over there for the stream and then sit down and like do a bit where we make one of those cocktails, right? So I really want to start adding stuff like that in. I think that would be a lot more fun. And a great use of the space, right? Like I want the game room for myself. I want to host more and have my friends over, but to be able to really utilize that space also for the stream and to be more creative with it is what I'm looking to do. So those right now are going to be the big 3 things that I'm going to be pinging chat long term. I think I might just, because these are all going to be like threads where they're all individually important, I might just create a new chat channel that's just these threads, so you only respond within the threads, but then the chat channel itself has them all much more organized. And I think I might do that, because then it'll be easier to find. Because if I put them in the topics channel and then we start growing and then people start adding topic ideas, it will get lost really, really quickly. But yeah, I think if I have just a channel that's talking about like community-based stuff, what if I put it in the polls channel? Does that make more sense? Like if I said, hey, I want ideas. Well, no, because polls, that doesn't really make sense because that's more voting wise. It would be more like a community ideas channel. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. So those ideas are coming down the pipe a lot sooner. Like I said, I've been trying to kind of kick things into high gear now that we have kind of a more clear goal. We have the badges out there. So for our bits cheers, for our subs, you guys have you have custom badges now. XP, the channel points has been fleshed out a little bit more. So we have everything from sound alerts in there to the standard interactions. We have a couple like specialty things in there. You can ask special questions to myself or Kage when he's here. And yeah, we're just trying to flesh that out. We're also looking for new ideas there. So if you guys have anything, we do have the suggestions channel in the Discord as well. And yeah, we are, we're making slow adjustments. I do have some really fun updates actually. So for next week, not right now, but for next week, we have some major updates happening. I am hoping the absolute goal will be that we can make those updates on Monday when Kage's back for review. But I have something in the physical mail coming that I really want to be here when that happens. So what I'll if it doesn't actually arrive on Monday, which it should, the whole goal is the earliest it could arrive is on Monday. So I'm hoping that it arrives on Monday itself before stream. If that happens, great. If not, we're going to have to postpone it a week to the following Monday because I'm actually, okay. So I say that because next Friday, we're going to have to switch things up. We might be rescheduling next Friday to Thursday, but I have to talk to Kage about that because I'm going to be out of town for the weekend. But yeah, hopefully next Monday, big updates for the stream. But if not, it'll have to be pushed off. So I'm really, really hoping everything works out for happening on Monday. And other than that, yeah, just working on back end stuff on the Discord. So we're making things a little bit more livable, guys. Goal is to make everything a little bit more palatable for everyone. But that is all of my updates. So we can get into today's topic. Cosmic got his question about attunement. Good question, by the way. Nice little refresh. I'm sorry, I was kind of getting frustrated in the middle of the IT issues with the TTS, and so that kind of popped me right back into D&D mode, which is good. But all right, so let's dive in. Today's topic, everyone, that we've all been waiting for, the history of bards. So this really kind of threw me. It was kind of just a random one I wanted to do. I was like, okay, let me find something that we haven't done yet. I'm really enjoying the history of. So I wanted to try and choose something that we haven't really done and something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, right? Obviously, I've talked to a lot about High Point and its history, the things that influence it. We've talked a lot about, all of my magic classes and how music and the bard class have the highest potential in High Point, right? So I kind of wanted to touch on that, and anything that I can kind of do, to focus on High Point when Kage is not here is kind of what I like to do. So I thought that this would be a good bridge, right? I've gotten to talk a lot about, music in my world and in High Point. So let's look at how D&D has looked at music throughout. And it was absolutely fascinating to me because not only did I just absolutely get so much information about these bardic classes and each edition, but I pulled so much information that I had to split it up into a second episode simply because bardic classes, like the history of the bardic class, wasn't enough. I'm trying to make sure. Yes, okay. So I had so much information on the bardic classes, and one thing that I hadn't heard of in a very, very long time, something I had just completely forgot about, came up, and I was like, oh, I'll probably just cover that. And I realized that it was its own segment. It would have been it would have been literally, we would have gotten like maybe 20 minutes, 10, 20 minutes into the conversation, and then I would have derailed into an entire episode's worth of backlog. So that's going to be its own entire thing. So today we are going to be looking at the history of Bard, but next week, and you'll see why, next week we will get into the history of prestige classes. And you'll see why, because when it comes to Bard, that was one thing that came up right away. And I just wanted to dive into that as well, but it became its own thing. So keep in mind, if you see that and you're interested, we're going to cover it next week. Not next Friday. Sorry, not next Friday. I'm out next Friday. If we do an episode, it'll be on Thursday. And if not, we'll just have to push it to the next week. But we will cover that next on the next episode. That's not a review. So, history of the Bard. We're going to go all the way back to first edition, starting with AD&D, because it was first introduced in the AD&D first edition's player's handbook. So there was no concept of a bard in the absolute original OD&D or anything prior to this. So, which kind of makes sense because a lot of that was just more of, what the individuals, Gygax and his buddies wanted to be at the time and what their individual interests were. So it would make sense that they didn't cover anything that, they weren't actively playing. But we first get introduced to the bard, but we don't get the Bard as a class right away. So it is fascinating that in the player's handbook, the Bard is mentioned, but it is not just a class that you can have right out the gate like we are used to today and like most of the other editions do. No. Bard is this secret subset of classes that aren't actually obtainable until you hit certain prerequisites. And as I dug into this, because I this was kind of a foreign concept to me, I dug into it a little bit more and found out that this was the precursor to the Prestige class. So that's why I want to do a whole history on it, because it starts all the way back at first edition, and Prestige classes are insane. They're awesome. And I want to do the whole section on that. But yeah, this is like the beginnings of that, because these aren't classes like the Bard and a couple others aren't classes that you're allowed to just take right out the gate. You actually had to advance in other classes and hit certain prerequisites before you were allowed to transition and get any of these benefits. So I think this is actually kind of cool. It's not something that we've ever seen in like, I don't think 5th edition has anything close to this in terms of having to hit multiple prerequisites before you can obtain something in terms of a class. So yeah, this is fascinating. Definitely gives me those old school D&D vibes. But with that, the Bard class was, again, some sort of like a subclass. So essentially what you had to do to qualify as a Bard, you had to follow a very specific like progression set. So you had to first off, in order to become a Bard, you had to start as a fighter. So hands down, you had to begin right out the gate as a fighter. You'd begin as a fighter. You'd have to advance to at least 5th level. So you had to be a fighter till at least 5th level. But here's the caveat: you couldn't surpass 7th. So this is one of those times where it'd be great. I wish Kage was here, because I've talked a lot about not remembering where things influence me from outside areas and why I make certain decisions in High Point. And I have like my Warlock class where you have to get a certain minimum level, but you can only have a certain maximum if you want to use a certain class for Warlock. And it's just great to see those represented here in an early edition to kind of remind myself, like, okay, these are those like little things, the type of mechanics that you saw early on that have definitely influenced the way that High Point works. But yeah, so you had to start as a fighter. You had to reach a minimum of level 5, but no higher than a level 7. And then once you've done that, you can move on to step 2. Give me one more second. I got to go like take care of this mustache real quick. I got to go shave it down, otherwise it's going to be bugging me the whole stream. So give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back and we'll get on to step 2. All right, that is all taken care of. Jeez, that was... Whew. Okay, so here we are. So step 1, have to start as a fighter, make it to level 5. You cannot surpass level 7. Then once you've done that, step number 2 to becoming a Bard, you have to switch to Thief. So after reaching the required level as a fighter, you would then have to switch or multi-class into Thief. Now, the crazy part, if you guys remember, we did this. We talked about this on our episode previously, and if you didn't catch that, you can catch that in our VOD channel. A little plug here for the VOD channel. But yeah, link in the description. We made an entire episode on the history of multiclassing. And we talked about how multiclassing worked in 1st edition, where you could switch to another class, but like let's say you made it to level 5 in one class and you wanted to switch to another, you would be able to do that, but you'd be locked off from advancing and accessing all of your abilities as the first class until the other class reached equal level. So if you were a fighter and then wanted to become a wizard, you'd have to stop being a fighter, and you couldn't do anything fighter related for 5 levels until the wizard caught up, and then you can start using both of them again. So that's how multi-classing used to work. So that's why this one was crazy, because if you wanted to become a bard, you had to start as a fighter, go up to level 5, no higher than level 7, then switch, not multi-class, switch to thief. That's why that terminology sounds a little bit weird to some of you. Now, once you switch to thief at that time, you're shut off from your fighter aspect. You have to focus on your thief until you reach an equal level. Then during the step 2, you have to progress the thief to at least level 5, but no higher than 9th level. So this is really strange. Most other multi-classing usually prioritizes the primary class. Usually says that the first class you take can't be higher than the second. Now in this particular case, it's a little bit backwards. The first class is minimum 5, max 7. Second class is minimum 5, max 9. And that's kind of nice, but again, it's more, I think, the idea behind what a bard is. I think that they were trying to better lean into what the thief brings into the mix. But once you've reached a minimum of level 5 in your second class and a maximum of level 9, and again, once you reach level 5 or the corresponding class with the fighter, you now have access to both your skills again. So you're a much more, broader aspect. Now, also consider this. If you did the bare minimum and took level 5 in each, or you got to remember this is individual levels. So now you're a total of level 10. So this is only step 2 and you're a bare minimum level 10. And if you took the max at this point, you're level 16 and you're still not a bard yet. Think about that. Remember, we said that you not only get to I can speak English. Not only do you not get to start as a bard, you can't even reach it until minimum level 10, which is fascinating because there's somewhere in my brain that made sense when I talked about my bard class, and I said that the highest level of bard in my world has to get to, or the minimum level you have to get to before you can have a chance to unlock the higher powers, is level 10. So I find this interesting that, again, one of those little pieces of history probably floating around my brain that help inspire how the bard works in High Point. But I find that fascinating that with this, if you want to be a bard, you are waiting till a minimum level 10. But if you want to max this out and get the best of both of these classes, you have to wait till you're level 16. Mind blowing. But once you do that, once you've reached the minimums and or maximums of each the fighter and the thief, you take on the third step, which is transition into a bard. Only after filling those 2 requirements of fighter and thief can the character finally become a bard. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me that you have to get prerequisites in 2 other classes, not just how you're built, not just your stats, but you have to grind for 10 levels to prove that you're worthy of this class, and then it's given to you. So what happens? What do you get when you finally transition? Well, you get a couple interesting class features. First off, the hit die that bards use is a D6 for hit points, the same as the thieves. Now, I didn't write this down, which I should have, but I'm pretty sure that in first edition, fighters are a D8 or a D10. So you started off as fighter to get the D8 or the D10. You switched to a thief, and then you stayed. You switched to a thief to get a D6 for hit points as your hit die, and then you get to stay with that. So that's one of your trade-offs. Obviously, you're not going to be a big brute. You're going to stay at that lower D6 for the thief. And that makes sense. Remember, we said before, it lets thief go higher, and that's probably to lend more credence or give more focus to the thieving and roguelike abilities that were, I guess, stereotypical of the bard. You also, once you did this, you got access to spells, which neither of the previous 2 classes got. So bards did have access to druidic spells in first edition, though they were limited, and they didn't get, so they didn't get the full breadth. It was kind of like what we call half-casters, right? They did get a decent list, but it was from the druid spells, which again, we'll get into why that's a little bit interesting here in just a second. But they were limited, and their progression was a lot slower. So that was a lot slower. So where kind of, again, like half casters, they weren't getting as many spells per level, nor were they getting access to as much of the spell list. Now, what's really interesting that I mentioned here is that it's the access to the druidic spells. Now, what we're going to go over on the next deep dive is the prestige classes, because in first edition, druid was also one of these classes that you couldn't just pick. In first edition, you had to prerequisite other classes, just like you did with bard, to become a druid. So it's interesting that that comes with its own spell list, but again, for ease of use probably, and for the sake of it was their first, publicized edition, probably wanted to make it a little bit cheaper. It made sense to share them. But is that correct? I don't know. I think when we go over that episode, I'm probably going to pull up that spell list when we go over all the classes, and I want to see, did it make sense to do it that way, or can we suss out whether that was efficiency and cost cutting? But yeah, found it interesting that they pull to a druidic spell list that is also one of these like fancier classes. Next, after being able to get spells, you were also given bardic knowledge, and this gave you an ability called legend lore. Now, what that allowed the person to do is recall obscure or like ancient knowledge, like forgotten in the ages kind of knowledge. And it was basically it was basically the precursor to what we know bardic knowledge to be now. But this one was more specific to, I guess, like I attribute this to how most people use religion checks to kind of gain, like, or I guess we don't really use arcana checks anymore, but like when people do like history or religion, that's kind of what it was a precursor to, was being able to know knowledge because you knew poems and you knew stories and you knew things that weren't everybody's knowledge. Like, you memorized stories, whereas everyone else just knew what was needed to be known. So bardic knowledge made sense that you had knowledge that not every average person would, because of the vast amount of stories that you had and the traveling that you've done and things of that sort. But that was really all we got. It was called legend lore. It wasn't bardic knowledge as we know it, but it was just giving them a boost to being able to recall things or know knowledge that not everybody else would have. But that would become bardic knowledge. So yeah, I kind of like legend lore a little bit more than bardic knowledge, to be honest. Like, I think when they called it legend lore in first edition, I think they nailed it. It's called bardic knowledge now. And I don't know, bardic knowledge, legend lore. I think legend lore just, I mean, maybe it was too semantic. Maybe they were like, oh no, that's not too semantic, but like maybe it was too detailed. Maybe they're like, no, that means too much. Maybe we just need bardic knowledge to give it more of a broader respect. I don't know. I like legend lore. Also, they were given after this legend lore, bards were able to, or they were given the ability now to charm creatures with their music. It wasn't really defined early on. It was kind of more of, again, it takes you till 10 to 16th level, so it was much later gameplay. So it was much more of the roleplay aspect of using your music allowed you to charm them. And most DMs, if I understand correctly from what I read, most DMs just leaned into the aspect of, without casting a spell, you're basically reacting as if they're under the charm spell. So that's as far as I understand how it was utilized early on, because it was more for, these were definitely more advanced classes, I guess you would say, because these were more for people who wanted to dedicate the time to get to them, and therefore would, like, again, their early editions weren't about, oh, I want to get to certain something because it has the exact build I want. It was more about the role play aspect and the character building aspect, not so much all of the things that you can do. But I do like that they were able to use their magic to charm, fascinate, instill fear. You get a lot of stories about what DMs allowed during this time, because it was so kind of open-ended. It was basically music could stir the emotion. So they kind of ran with that, which I really like. I really kind of miss, not necessarily the openness of how vague that was, but I really do just miss the creativity in the moments of what you could really pull off. And I think that a lot of people could lean into this idea a little bit more, and DMs could be a little bit more creative instead of waiting for them to use bardic inspiration and make spells happen. Why not give them the ability to just change someone's mood with music? with no spell or magic involved, right? I like it. I usually like doing performance checks for that. So all right, and then specific skills, other than the fact that they got to retain the skills that they've already learned, they are still classified more so as a thief. So they got to retain some of the thieving abilities more specifically, but they didn't get like the later versions of it. So it's like they might be able to pick locks at, like at a very low level, but they wouldn't get all of the abilities like climbing walls or hiding in shadows. They would get some, but not all. So it was kind of, again, per the DM, what they really wanted to make sure made the best character at the time. But you definitely got more doled down versions, and you didn't get the advanced higher versions of any of those thieving skills. So as you leveled up, they were basically still stuck at that like level 5. And then as for weapons and armor, at this early stage, this is the kind of the cool part where I liked how they mix and match, right? So with the skills, you basically get to lean in on your thieving skill sets. However, when it came to weapons and armor, bards were allowed to use any weapons that were available to the fighter class. So that's nice. They were definitely, not unable in terms of actual melee combat. And you were able to wear armor. So even though they were proficient in any of the armors that a fighter would be too. So even though they could wear heavy armor, their spell casting would still be affected. So that is one thing that they had to keep in mind, is that it was still preferred that the bards wear light armor to not affect their spell casting, but they weren't restricted in any other way of wearing the other armors. So once you became the bard and you got all of these abilities, progression from there, because you were already pretty high level, was a little bit unique, right? Because you're already starting this brand new class, again, anywhere between level 10 at minimum and level 16 at max. But you also had to get through the 2 other classes first, which again is just its own thing, right? It's a whole new experience because you're doing 2 different classes, and then you're starting off with a brand new class way later in the game. So as that would happen, it doesn't give you a lot of time to really get used to it. You kind of have to shift mindsets pretty quickly. And one of the notes that like a lot of people make point of is, because of this, bards were extremely rare in gameplay, but they also were seen as a lot more powerful than anyone gave them credit for, because you start so late in the game. And if you were a good enough player to handle those 2 lower classes, once they came together, being a fighter with roguelike tendencies that could cast magic was not really something that was like fully seen in first edition. So it really made you a very big versatile character. It just took a lot to get there. And I think most people just didn't want to have that kind of dedication, because most people didn't understand what the implications were once you reach that height. But another thing that I did find too that was interesting is how the concept of bardic music changed, right? Because in first edition, like we mentioned, the concept of being able to influence people with your music is like the charm ability was kind of vague, and it wasn't really fully fleshed out. But it still was in there, and DMs and players were encouraged to utilize music as part of their characters' abilities. So the idea that the books would say that you can charm, you can influence NPCs, like again, these weren't hard and fast rules, but these were the examples that were given to players and DMs of being able to charm people, influence them in different ways based on the way that you storytell or the way that you sing a certain song. And so it was much more about like the role play, the narrative, and less about mechanics, right? So it was, hey, I'm a bard. Do I notice if either of these guards look sad or, something like that, right? And then you can pick up on that and be like, hey, I know all about love loss, blah, blah, blah. Like, what do I, make a perception check? I know you noticed that, he doesn't have his wedding ring, but there's a tan line there or something. You know what I mean? Like there were a lot more narrative ways to approach how a bard could use their, what they weren't calling charisma at that time, but this idea of this influence, this ability to charm people and get to know people. And that's what I miss about bards, right? A lot of people just have this, they have the meme concept of being able to seduce, and a lot of people play just this charismatic, boastful character. But a lot of the times bards, like, again, I really appreciate what the D&D movie did for bards, because it really represented the idea that it's more about the person that can rally people. It's more about the person that can be there. That's an everyman's everyman kind of concept, where it's like it's the person that anyone feels comfortable around and can really get things done, whether it's coming up with a plan or just getting behind the plan. So I really kind of like how these charm abilities weren't specific. It was just, hey, you have an influence and you have a way, play it out and see how it works. But again, most of this was all up to the dungeon master on what was going to be allowed. And really, I think that's a lot more fun, is when you play into what the character's trying to do and what they want to do and create a fun narrative, more than just, well, it says I can do this and I get a +2, so therefore it happens, right? I think sometimes that's what I miss about the older editions, is I get kind of lost in this mindset sometimes about just how it's so calculated now, to where it's like there is no more, there's not enough like role play that matters anymore, in the sense that everything's so down to the dice roll and the mechanic that it's basically black and white. Does it happen or does it not happen? And I kind of miss these like areas where you could have this potential back and forth. And that's a little bit more the way that I play sometimes, is instead of making people roll for everything, sometimes it's a little bit more of an attempt to talk it out. And I really like how these were basically the rules of how that worked. But it also goes on to say that the charm effect would do anything from like swaying NPCs' minds to getting them to be friendly to you, make enemies. You could make enemies with this. You could change people's opinions of each other, or you could even make enemies less likely to be hostile to you. So those were some of the examples that people had either used or that were in the books. So found that really interesting. I don't think that normal charm abilities should be so vague, but I do kind of like this, go with the flow and make sure the narrative makes sense kind of vibe with this early bard. And more about influencing with, the use of music. And this is more to talk about like what I've already talked about with the emotions. You could calm. So the book was talking about how you could allow the music of a bard to calm hostile creatures, encourage allies. You could manipulate people during social events. So if you could sneak your bard in on stage and play a song while you're trying to do negotiations, you can maybe make negotiations a little bit more favorable. But again, it wasn't, there were no hard and fast rules. It was all for the DM. So I really like that. And that was it. That was basically the bard of first edition. You basically worked your way up to 10th, up to 16th level. You became this powerful, melee fighter that had some roguish abilities that could also influence people with music, and you had a way with people, and you also had magic. And that was just a combination that no one really saw in first edition. No one knew what to do with. But if you made it there at that level, by level 15, you were having the time of your life. Like, that would be the player that you would want on your party to have a lot of fun with. So I dig that. All right, so we go to second edition now. So the second edition bard refined everything a little bit, of course, what we talked about in all of these history of. Second edition takes what they learned from first edition, dresses it up a little bit better, adds some extra detail, puts some pretty lace on it, repackages it, and sends it out the door. So in this edition, the biggest and most obvious change is that this is the first time that we get bard as a core class. So second edition dropped the idea that it took all these prerequisites and said you can be a bard right out the gate, and you don't have to advance in any other classes first. And that's just kind of, I think, what everyone expects from a bard, right? Especially nowadays, everyone's going to expect that bard is a playable class right now. They kept the hit die for D6, so no big deal there. They are still keeping this a rogue subclass. It's really interesting because it's like the way that they used to have terminologies, right? You had like wizard was the class, but then mage was a subclass, illusionist was a subclass. You had, you know, warrior was the class, fighter was technically the subclass, right? So it's interesting. It's like you hear rogue is the class, but thief is the subclass. So technically bard is a rogue subclass from early back in the day. Like the language works that way, but it's also very strange because that's not really how we would think of it now. But yeah, they used to just have more umbrella terms for the generalized class, and then your specific was what we would know as a subclass. But yeah, it looks very basic when you look at it from what subclasses are now. You look back and go, that's not a subclass, that's just a class. But yeah, so gonna mimic the thief a lot in terms of like they use the thief XP table and everything else like that. They do also have spellcasting, although this time they switched from doing the druidic spells to now they get to draw from the wizard spell list. But similar to half-casters, not exactly like, but similar to half-casters, they are limited, and they do get the wizard spell list, but only up to 6th level. So they are capped at the wizard spells up to 6th level. Their progression is also slower. So while they get a broader range of spells than the previous ones, they are still going to level up slower than most other spellcasters. And then bardic music. So a little bit of change in the bardic music. You have a little bit more defined rules in terms of what music can do. Second edition also defined a mechanic that bards can actually use their music to produce magical effects. And really they lean into the idea that music is now magic. So this is what explained the charming of creatures, inspiring allies. And then they even added in the ability that bardic music can act as a counter to other magic and spells. So they even started to play around with the idea that bards had this almost innate ability to do counter spells or counter magic. But a lot of these were limited in their like daily usages and like how many you can do. So they were kind of like spell slots or things like that. But really interesting that they started to branch out into that. And we'll get into that here in just a second, a little bit more of that. Excuse me one second. They also, because we're leaning in and because we're under the umbrella of rogue, they do maintain a lot more of the thieving skills. So they get so in second edition they refined it more to where they get pickpocket and climbing walls, and they can detect noise, but they don't get like the hidden shadows. I do think they get to choose whether or not they get pick locks, but like hidden shadows, move silent, they don't get all of them. So only a few of them that they're limited to. So I kind of agree with that. You don't want them to have, you don't want to make the thief, completely useless if you can also be a bard. And the bard's legend lore ability. So previously we got the legend lore, which allowed them to basically just have knowledge that no one else got. And so now what it's done is second edition officially came out and changed legend lore into what we now know as a bardic knowledge. And that allowed them to basically make knowledge checks to recall information about whatever the topic that they were talking about is. And really the biggest difference is that they formalized it. Before it was, hey, your character has access. So in situations that make sense and per the DM's ruling, they would make a roll, and they may or may not make a roll and they would get the information. At least with this particular one, it became a skill, just like anything else. It became a proficiency. You were able to use this, and there was a roll attached to it that you were now able to do. And this would have been like a knowledge check, so that would have been based off of intelligence. So your intelligence modifier and your intelligence score would have judged this, whereas before it was kind of a give me, and now it's more of an official like actual stat to you. And as we mentioned before, they can use a broad range of weapons, and they can wear light armor without interfering with spellcasting. So just like before, they basically have the fighting prowess of a standard fighter with the weapon and armor capabilities, but their spellcasting is limited like every other spellcaster and limited to light armor. The progression of the second edition bard was obviously a lot more smooth and a lot more straightforward in terms of advancing through it, because it is its own class. It's a single class. It starts at level 1. You didn't have to worry about anything else. But it did allow, starting earlier allowed you to become a little bit more versatile and learn a little bit more of the flexibility of the bard you got to see a little bit more of what it could do. Because before, when you start off between 10 and 16, right? And let's face it, if you're going to push it, you're probably going to be around the level 12, level 13, especially if you want to get that level 9 thief. You know, you're going to have at least level, level 14 if you're going to do the minimum level of bard. So, or a fighter to get the bard. So I'm just thinking, like, it doesn't give you a lot of time to think about what you can do and learn and practice and really customize the type of bard that you get, right? So being able to start right off at level 1 is going to give you the ability to customize this and make it more versatile, make it more unique, and fill in what the party actually needs in terms of that role. It's almost like they built this to almost be like a flex role, kind of, to help fill in what the party doesn't actually have. And they weren't really, they were kind of like a good like a flex character, because they didn't fill any one space fully. They weren't ever going to match any one particular person. You take a thief or an actual fighter or a cleric or a wizard, and all of them are going to do better at their individual jobs. But when one of them goes down in combat, or one of them needs a little bit of a bump, the bard's a great one to be there to kind of be that fill in. Now, the way that bardic music changed overall is that it just basically got more specified, right? We got more rules, and we got more specific ideas on what it can actually do, and what the player can actually do with it. So instead of it being narrative based, we actually had some hard and fast rules on what exactly it was going to be doing, and it was actually described as having magical qualities. So this is when they officially said that yes, bards are magic, and their music does produce magic and can influence everything from social situations to effects on the battlefield, right? And again, we even mentioned being able to do counters. So the first thing that this bardic music was given, right? Because we talked about it being codified, right? They first said, hey, narratively, figure out what's going on. And now they're like, hey, this is exactly what you can do with it. So the first thing we got is a classic. We got inspiration. Bards could basically utilize this to encourage the allies, give bonuses to morale, certain roles like attack rolls, saving throws. Of course, it's the traditional stuff like we all know. So this is the very first iteration of what we now know as bardic inspiration. Previously, it was just a general idea that they could influence things that included encouraging and giving people inspiration in a narrative sense. But this was the first iteration of being able to say, hey, I want to give them a boost on this attack roll. I want them to make sure they get that saving throw. And it basically, this became the cornerstone for combat, right? Being able to change someone's outcome on a certain roll became extremely beneficial and really like changed a lot of its versatility in combat as a support character, because usually before this, the best you got out of a support character was healing, and that's great. Don't want to, you don't want to like look bad on the healers, but that was about it. We didn't get a buffing type of character. We got tanks, we got heavy hitters, we got mages, we had a healer, but this was a nice little flex character that filled in a lot of those gaps, helped reinforce things, but also filled in for something that no one even knew didn't exist, which was that little like buffing character for the party. So while those bonuses remained pretty small in terms of even nowadays, bardic inspiration doesn't do a whole lot. Back then it was even smaller. Depending upon the role that you did for these things, you can give them a 1 or a 2, right? Nowadays, bardic inspiration, at least it's a D4, but you still had limitations on how much you could actually help. So 1 or 2 was great back then. Die rolls were a little bit simpler. You weren't adding 30 to your roll, but at the end of the day, again, this was the first iteration of what we now know as bardic inspiration. And it was the idea of saying, hey, here's something specific the bard can do, and that everybody can know how to do, right? Instead of everybody having to come up with a narrative of what their bard is able to do, this was like saying, hey, you guys can still talk it out. You can still say he does other things, but this is something that all bards should be able to say they can do, right? The next one, this is the one we all been waiting for, counter song. This one is one of the best things that I think came out of bard in terms of the early years, right? This is one of those really cool features that I think is just, when you think about it, there's a lot of ways that you can make this make sense depending on the setting, right? And it's probably one of the most unique abilities that I think bards have ever had. Whether or not second edition or any edition, if for that matter. But they can counter the effects of magic, I'm sorry, not the effects of all magic, but they were able to counter the effects of other magical music or sound-based attacks, right? So it wasn't like they were just a walking anti-magic shield. But I really liked that they delimited the idea of other magical music, which means other bards. So 2 bards could basically cancel each other out, which I find awesome. But the idea of sound-based attacks was, I think, one of their most unique features, right? Because just doing anti-magic or counter spell with music would be a little bit too much. But sound-based attacks, I think, are one of the best things to come out of that, because it makes so much sense not just to look at bards, or not just to go after other bards, but being able to go after anybody using like sound-based magic. I don't know. I think that's kind of a cool concept, and I thought that made this edition's version of bard really unique, in that sense that they could just like cancel that kind of stuff out. And depending upon what type of magic that you're considering, sound-based attacks, like you could expand that to a few different things. So like the imagination's there. One example I was able to pull out is that you can play a counter song to so here was one that I found I think was the most common one, is you can play a counter song to negate the effects of a harpy's enchanting song, or there are several creatures that can use sonic attacks, like screeching and things like that. Those attacks can also be countered. So not just like other bards, but harpies can be countered, which I think is great. Sirens, if you have them in your realm, it's great. And then sonic attacks, I think, are great because there's not a lot of them, but the idea that you can just manipulate those more unique situations. Excuse me, hiccups. I think it's fascinating that they really wanted to be able to make that bard unique in very unique situations. So situational, yes, but definitely gets points for uniqueness. And again, regardless of situational, I think having anything that gives you those once in a blue moon moments to not be, completely fucked, I'll take them, right? I'll be happy to take those on. But that was and then finally they gave us one more. So we have inspiration, we have counter song, and then the other more codified ability that we know we can do as bards is the charm abilities. Now we've talked about this before. In first edition, they started out with the idea that you can do charm, but this was the more centralized idea about how bards can actually charm creatures, but in a more formal way. And it's essentially that they would perform and creatures within range. So they'd have to make a performance check, right? This was an actual D20 roll. You'd make a performance check, and creatures within range would need to make saving throws or become charmed. So that was, and that's almost how it worked in first edition with a couple minute tweaks, but that was the more specified ruling. It was usually, either within earshot is usually a lot of the DM's ruling, or it was something like 30 feet. But as long as you were playing music and you made a successful performance check based on whatever your DM said you had to make, you would be able to charm, inflict the charmed condition on anybody within that, which is awesome. I think that's like super fantastic. Because again, narratively, I think it falls right into what a bard needs to be able to do. So that is second edition bards. So now we get into third edition. This is where things went like way off the rails, especially with the prestige stuff, because this is actually where prestige came back. So first edition had the precursor. Second edition got rid of it altogether, and now we get into third edition's version. So in terms of bard, again, we are now back to more so it is a core class. With a lot more well-defined features and versatility as a support character. So 3 and 3.5 really leaned into this idea that Bard was going to be the new support character that wasn't just a healer. We remained at the D6 for hit dice, and this wasn't so much because it wasn't so much connected to rogue or thief anymore. This was just to keep in line with the other changes that they made to other light armor class builds. So this is just more of a synchronization than it was a cast off of thief. And what's really interesting, so this is one of the fascinating things I love about doing these history ofs, is this is one of those unique things that I found that this is what I wanted always, and this is what I was surprised I didn't see as often with any of the other history ofs, is the spell casting and how it's changed. So originally, bards were able to use druid spells, and they were kind of like half casters, what we know as half casters. Second edition, they were on the wizards spell list, but much more closely related to half casters up to 5th level. And now in 3rd edition, bards are spellcasters, but they have now become what 3rd edition called spontaneous spellcasters, essentially similar to sorcerers. So we went from druidic spellcasting to wizard spellcasting to sorcerer spellcasting, which I don't necessarily disagree with, right? Because bards aren't necessarily casting spells. The magic is essentially building an aura and magic's happening around them and they're able to manipulate it. So I kind of like the idea that it follows sorcerer more, because that feels more in line with, like, I think druid technically made more sense because sorcerer is just innate and you're doing it. But if you're getting it from the music, then you're getting it from outside. So it's not quite as likely as a sorcerer, but you're also doing it naturally, which doesn't quite fit the wizard. So personally, out of the 3 magical spellcasting classes that we've related bard to, I think druid makes the most sense so far. Definitely let me know if you guys agree. All right. So similar to sorcerers, they were able to cast. So now they were able to cast spells with. So part of being part of the sorcerer magic users is that they could cast spells without preparing them in advance. So they had a limited selection, again similar to what we call half casters, but they do now have their own bardic spell list, which is really great. They don't have to share a spell list with anybody else. So they have a limited spell selection from their bardic spell list. But they don't have to prepare them in advance. It's kind of just what they're able to do. And they did focus a lot on this. In terms of the spell list, they focused a lot on enchantment, illusion, and healing spells. So again, trying to flesh out the bard into overall supporting class, and not just focus on healing, which I think, again, is really fantastic. And again, they did keep tradition with 2nd edition, and they are capped at 6th level spells. So even though they have their own spell list, they cannot go any higher than the 6th level spell, including, I think that includes upcasting. So another change that they did to the bardic skill sets, right? Because we talked before about how they've been modifying what the bards can do. So in terms of actual skill sets, not so much the magical properties, but the skill sets, bards were now fully intentioned to be the flex character, the one that could do it all. So far, or so much so that they were basically, all bards are given the jack of all trades ability in 3rd edition, which allows them to use any skill untrained. So any skill set that was in 3rd edition, bards were able to do it, just like basically pick it up and not be trained and be fine with it. So I think that was fantastic. It again makes this character really easy to just kind of be what the party needs it to be, while still also being a unique character to play. They did change up a little bit, so they're not so much leaning as much fighter as they used to. So bards are now limited to simple weapons and light armor. So just 100% they are now locked into simple weapons and light armor. Later in 3.5, they were also given proficiency with shields, so they did upgrade that. But now they can no longer wear the wide range and have all access to all weapons. They're going to be more of the light fighter now, but they do have access to shields later in 3.5. And they were able to cast shield spells in light armor without any penalties, which is basically the significant improvement over any of the other additions, I think. I'm not really sure how that how some people consider that an improvement, because realistically, I kind of like the idea that the bard could wear heavier armor and then just couldn't cast spells. This is basically just saying, hey, you have less weapons and less armor that you can wear, but you have a shield. And I'm just like, eh. But again, it's that whole idea of it makes sense for what the bard build really is going to be doing for the party. Let's see. No changes really to the progression system, seeing as how it's a standard, a standard class, so they didn't do anything fantastical with changing how that works. Other than like, the enhancements of what 3.5 did with feats, you were able to just really customize the bard a lot more in third edition with the aspect of feats, ASIs, and just the general progression. You could really make a focused bard doing a lot of really unique builds that I just, there were too many to like really compile a good examples online, but there were some really unique builds for like the illusionist spells and bards being able to sway people with their music and also have illusionary spells cast on top of that. It was crazy the stories people tell about what they were able to pull off, just with the basic stuff that the bard is given without anything like, over. So again, I think bard has always been a really versatile class, and I just think that a lot of people shoehorn it into the Mimi bard, and there's a lot of different ways that you could play and really pull out a lot of these features and a lot of these aspects. So there's definitely a lot more to bard, I think, than most people give it credit for. But bardic music, moving on to bardic music. So with third edition, obviously third edition wanted to keep the better mechanics. They wanted to hone in on better mechanics, but keep the good role play aspects. So they wanted to make bardic music a little bit more well defined and a little bit more of a central mechanic for the bard. So it was basically linked directly to their skill in performance. So bardic music and their performance went hand in hand officially, and the abilities that the bard could do with music actually started getting tied with the levels that they had. So they were able to do more and more things as they leveled up, instead of just in general being able to do things. Some of the abilities that they were able to get were things like inspire courage. So again, not quite the same as what we know now today as bardic inspiration. But because their ability to play music and everything was, I mean, this is where you get like the original memes of like, while everyone's dying, the bard's just sitting there playing music in the back. And this is where it comes from, because again, a lot of it was based on music instead of like talking or things like that. But with like Inspire Courage, like this was given to you right at first level. It granted the abilities to give bonuses on attack rolls, weapon damage rolls, and saving throws against fear effects specifically. So they tiered out what this inspiration could do. So at first level, attack rolls, damage rolls, saving throws against fear, and then you would get bonuses at higher levels as you leveled up. But that was the first level of courage that you got, right? So you couldn't just do anything with it, but it gave you a good buff, right? Like I think that's a good way to buff a character at level 1 and make them available for the rest of the party. And being able to get increased bonuses at higher levels does make it scalable, and we've talked about this when we do reviews. Seeing things that are scalable right out the gate when you get one of these cornerstones early on, seeing it scale with you or come circled back on it later levels really make sure you understand like what the class is going to be doing. So really nice there. The next one you get is Inspire Competence. So at first level you got Inspire Courage, being able to just do a couple rolls. Inspire Competence you get at third level, and now you can use that basically gives them the ability to use the music to give bonuses on skill checks. So before it was just weapon attack rolls, damage rolls, and saving throws against fear effects. This one was ability checks, which was really nice for your allies when they were doing skill checks or proficiency checks on things that that they may not have a high skill rate in. This is more akin to what we expect Bardic Inspiration to be used on now. When you think of how we use Bardic Inspiration for that 1d4, that's what this is really like the precursor to. And this one was more for the non-combat, right? So whereas Inspire Courage was more during combat to help you with those rolls, Incompetence was Inspire Competence was the Bardic Inspiration we know it now. The out of combat situations, helping people with sneaking, climbing, deciphering a language, negotiating, persuading, things of that sort. So I kind of like that they broke the abilities, probably unnecessarily, but they did break the abilities into two uses, right? Combat and non-combat. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that they thought of being able to break that up into something that made sense for it to go in two different directions and not have it. I mean, I don't know. Bardic Inspiration makes sense, but I think a lot of the times people think of Bardic Inspiration too linearly, and I think that by having it split up between courage and competence, to me, kind of makes a little bit more sense, and it allows people to think more clearly about how to use it instead of have this vague idea of, well, will a plus 1d4 really be helpful right now? Whereas this is very specific to, I want to help you with that skill that you're doing, or I want to make sure that you hit that enemy, right? So there's a lot of things going on with that particular one. The next one that they were able to do outside of Inspire, Courage, and Competence is called Fascinate. This one was quite fascinating, actually. They were able to use their music to fascinate one or more creatures. I think this one came at level 5, and basically they were able to be captivated by that performance. And essentially any creature afflicted by this essentially were distracted to the point to where they would take no action other than watching and listening. So you've captivated an enemy or more to the point where they're just not doing anything in combat, except for, if they got attacked or anything, of course they would snap out of it. But yeah, really interesting that they had the courage to affect allies, but then they had this Fascinate to be able to affect enemies, which I thought was really interesting. A little bit OP, but again, started at 5th level, so you had to work up to it. At 6th level, you were able to get Suggestion. So bards were still, and again, it's so memey because they keep saying they use their music, and there's so many different ways that we know now that we can roleplay this. But again, the early editions always talked about music, but bards were able to use their music, their magic, whatever, to make a suggestion and it worked as the spell worked, to a fascinated creature. So I love that they also have this layering. So first you had to pull off your bardic music to fascinate. Whilst fascinated, you could then turn around and then make a suggestion, just like the spell suggestion, to one of those fascinated creatures, and then you can implant that suggestion and then hopefully make that to your advantage somehow. But I kind of like the idea that they didn't just give this ability to bards where you can just make suggestions and make anybody susceptible to you. I really like the idea that they put it essentially behind a paywall. You have to fascinate them first. It makes a whole lot more sense. And again, it makes a clear guideline on how to play the character. Then you have to wait till 9th level where we get Inspire Greatness. This was really cool because, again, this is an ally buff that allows you to grant an ally temporary hit points, a bonus action or a bonus attack roll, and a bonus to Fortitude save. So Fortitude was kind of like a Constitution save back in the day, but this was all 3, right? So with this Inspire Greatness at 9th level, this is way better than Bardic Inspiration. They get temporary hit points, they get a bonus action, and they get a bonus to their Fortitude. And like right there in the middle of battle, that's absolutely amazing. And I think their hit points was equal to one of their hit die. The temporary hit points was equal to one of their hit die. So that wholly changes the game when you got someone who has, your fight who has a D8 or a D10, and you give them a whole D8 or a D10 temporary hit points. Like that's amazing. And especially, this is like, again, at level 9, that's right around the time you want to be able to start doing that. So again, super, super flexible. They're getting a bonus attack rolls. Again, not a bonus attack, but a bonus to attack rolls and a bonus to Fortitude saves. And all of those were usually a 1 or a 2. I think there was usually a roll associated with that to decide if it was a 1 or a 2. Like if you critted, it was a 2, other higher rolls. And then at level 15, you get the Song of Freedom. So this one was really cool because at level 15, you were basically able to use your magic to break enchantments. And this would allow you to break things like charms, compulsions. Essentially, it works the same way to the 3rd edition's break enchantment spell, which I didn't pull up because I didn't have the resource for it. But yeah, things like charms, compulsions, gaze attacks, like things that were affecting people mentally, this would break it. So I'd also be really interested, I should talk to Kage about this, on whether or not we should consider this being able to work against psionics as well, because that would be really interesting since psionics is all about mental effects. That would be really cool if we deemed that this would be worth it. At level 18, you got Inspire Heroics, and again, another opportunity for allies. You were able to grant significant bonuses to saving throws and armor class. So this was now closer to like 4s and 5s instead of 1s and 2s. And it was one of the most, like, basically this was the most potent buff I think the game had seen up until this point. Like, this was one of the best buffs characters could do. So at level 18, it's a little bit late in the game, but again, for that high level gameplay, being able to give someone like basically a D6 bonus to saving throws or armor class is insane, right? Just being able to instantly give them that for a short period of time was game changing. And again, I really like that. And then counter song. So bards were able to use a performance to counter magical effects that depended on sound. So kind of like second edition, but this one was more specified. So you would roll a performance check, and if you succeeded, you were able to negate or reduce effects of sonic or language dependent spells. So the other, in second edition, you were more focused against like sonic attacks. This one is specifically language dependent spells. So if there's a spell of concentration that needs the mages to constantly say something, this would cancel that out. So this is much closer to your true counter spell mechanic, which I think is great. I think this one you get also much later, like level 18, which is kind of a shame. I think this one should have gotten a lot earlier, but wow, like absolutely being able to just take, like, again, I'm just playing my loot and no other person within range can do magic. Like, absolutely mind-blowing. I think it was great. And I love that. I love this progression of bard. Like, I really look upon this and all of the subclasses that we've reviewed recently, and more so to the 5th edition way of doing subclasses. This is what we're talking about. Being able to see this progression, inspire courage, inspire competence, inspire greatness. These types of progressions are the things that Kage and I are talking about. And these are the things that we love the most. This is, again, why I'm a sucker for these earlier editions, because all the things that we say that we like, all the things that we say that we try to do and try to emulate, this is where it's coming from. This is it. This idea that you can go from level 6 to level 9 and go from suggestion to inspire greatness. I was going from giving someone a small 1 or 2 on an ability check to now I'm giving them a bonus to their attack roll and their fortitude. And then I go next, and then I'm able to completely free them of charms. It's just, this is the kind of stuff that I miss in terms of progression, is being able to see that synergy and it build upon itself. And again, like the naming scheme, right? We've talked, like, all the things that I say I love, I'm seeing in this. And it's like, I see why I really enjoyed the earlier editions. So yeah, so I'm curious what you guys think about that one. That was 3rd edition, a lot more streamlined. Well, I don't want to say streamlined, a lot more, what did I say earlier? Codified, a lot more specified in terms of the mechanics, and a lot more situationally directed. I like this so much more than Bardic Inspiration. A flat D4 or whatever, plus like some proficiency bonuses, whatever, on a certain variety of roles is one thing, but being able to start out, encouraging people, and then doing the competence, and then being able to do the greatness, and then heroics, that's what I would much rather see in a bard. I would much rather, I will take this over Bardic Inspiration any day. That's my hot take. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let's move on to 4th edition. We're having a good time. So 4th edition. Now, like a lot of things, the 4th edition really just kind of made a lot of adjustments to fit the type of gameplay that they were developing. So it was basically, Bard was, these notes don't make much sense to me because I don't know a lot of like what I'm writing in terms of trying to translate an edition that I'm unfamiliar with, but they were categorized into something called an arcane leader. And their support class leaned much more into the healer with some buff and debuff aspects, but not as much as we were looking at in the previous edition. I think healing was much more of the focus. The arcane leader was also like much more of the like command and control type on the battlefield. Again, 4th edition was very much all about combat. So they did a lot of things to change classes to fit the battlefield, I guess, a lot more. So here's an example. For the first time, hit dice have been increased. Now hit dice is a D8 for hit points. It really doesn't make anything else, doesn't make any other sense other than making it more appealing for those combat, right? Again, they had to make everything more appealing to be in combat heavy. So that makes sense. If you're gonna do a combat heavy campaign, make it higher for hit points, I guess. Powers, they were able to, so they had this thing called a power system. Oh, or fourth edition had the thing called the powers system, if you guys aren't familiar with it, where you had like at wills, encounters, and daily powers. So you had at wills, which are like your cantrips. You had encounters, which were only able to be done, you know, X number of times per specific encounter, and then dailies, which were, you know, refreshed every day. And these are where a lot of the buffs, debuffs happened. You know, I think this is where, you know, think of like where you're going to get your vicious mockery, or your, you know, your healing word and things of that sort. Music kind of took a backseat in terms of it was still there and it was represented in a sense through like the powers that you used, but it didn't really start with the music. The music was more of an afterthought to show off what the power was doing, but it was power first and then music was the way it worked. It was almost like how D&D treats wands. It was like, it's the spell, we're more worried about the spell, and then the wands just how the spell's happening. And that's kind of what they did with music. It was just there to be the precursor to why you were able to do these things, but what you were able to do was kind of put first. They switched up the bardic powers in terms of the spell casting, so they gave them a whole new spell casting list, which basically consisted of a lot more healing powers, and a few more command and control powers. So like slow, or things like that, where they could basically like manipulate the enemies on the battlefield. But again, it was way heavier, tilted towards the extra healer on the battlefield, because again, healing was a huge part in 4th edition, so I can see why they leaned on the bard to go back into like a healer position, kind of more of a stereotypical, I guess, what you would think. They still remained pretty versatile in all of their skills. They were able to get bonuses on skills that they were proficient in, and they were able to do things that they weren't proficient in. But those kind of skill sets weren't as heavily used in 4th edition, so it's kind of a moot point with that. They were still required, or they were still limited to light armor, but they were given proficiency with simple weapons and military ranged weapons. So again, limited to being a light fighter, but they did get this military ranged weapon addition, whatever that means for 4th edition. And of course, they had a wide range of musical instruments, but again, that was more for that was an afterthought. Because they were this like arcane leadership, there was a whole different set of progressions that you would want to do for this in terms of what feats you could do and how the role as a leader played out in 4th edition. So you weren't really like the run around flex character, I'm going to fill all the spots and be the support character. It was more like you were the character that leader, as in you were the one being able to kind of like sit back and do things while everybody else like did the work, but you were able to help out like on the sidelines. So not a completely useless like support character, like you know, just a healer, but you know, like a healing wizard, but you weren't really like as versatile as you used to be, as far as I could understand. So as being classified as arcane leaders, the musical abilities were represented through powers. So roleplay wise, you still had music, but these powers became different, right? So they had some new ones. There's one called like Majestic Word, which was a healing power that allowed you to, you were able to heal an ally and grant them a short movement as an immediate action. So I think they can move 3 squares as an immediate action while getting a small like 1d4 plus their proficiency bonus in healing. So it was supposed to represent like inspiring like vigor and things like that. But again, it's majestic word. They try to say, but you can, you inspire it through your music, but it's like majestic word. And what are you really doing? Like, I don't know. It would have been better to say that you could like, I don't know. The idea that you're giving them extra movement and trying to crawl away is more of a distractionary thing. So I guess it kind of works. But yeah, again, way more focused on the healing. They had one called Song of Short Rest. Or no, I'm sorry, Song of Rest. And it was done after a short rest. You could use this to allow everyone to gain additional hit points that they didn't during the short rest. So kind of like a mini buff of HP, which was kind of nice. But again, we're back to more healing spells. Inspiring Refrain. This was what they called an at-will power, so that they could do this at any point. This one allowed the bard to grant a bonus to an ally's next attack roll. So at will, at any point, you could just be like, hey, you get a bonus to your next attack roll, equal to, usually, I think it was like either a 1d4 or it was like their proficiency bonus. But that was it. It was just a, hey, you can next attack roll. And that was just always, you could just do that every single turn. Boom, I'm doing that. You get that, you get that, you get that. So that was just a thing that they had. Stirring Shout was an encounter power. So once an encounter, they were able to do this. And basically they were able to like shout words of encouragement. So this is what I don't understand. I guess this is like a precursor to Vicious Mockery, because the notes were very strange. It says you can shout words of encouragement that would cause enemies ongoing psychic damage. So it's almost like you're the audience at an away mission or at a home game yelling at the away team, right? Like it's very weirdly worded how they talked about it. But yeah, basically it was Vicious Mockery as far as I'm considered. And it was a way to just basically they would just take ongoing psychic damage. Song of Courage was another one that they were able to do. This one was daily, so this one was like much more powerful, but it basically granted all of your allies, so your whole party, bonuses to attack and damage rolls for the duration of the encounter. So you only got to use this once, but once you did it, all of their attack and damage rolls were boosted. But what I don't understand is like, again, if it's a daily, why not just like, again, it was a combat heavy campaign setting. So with 4th edition, you were having multiple combats per session or in a day. So you had to do this at the worst one, but still pretty powerful that everyone just gets an instant boost for the whole combat though. So you can see why they limited it to once per day. And then they also had another one called Improvised Verses, where they were able to use a minor action, what we would call a bonus action, to shift their allies around on the battlefield, representing, again, this was kind of like that leadership idea. So this one was like, you were able to grant people the ability to like move around to the battlefield when it wasn't their turn. So I think we have something like this in 5th edition, where it's like the commander feat, where not on your turn, you can give commands to other players to take actions that are your actions, like they can use your movement or whatever. So yeah, kind of a precursor to that too. It was very interesting. Not what I would really want for a bard, not what I would expect for a bard. And yeah, I just wasn't really happy with that. I think they could have done a lot better. I'm still thinking that 3rd edition absolutely nailed bard. In my opinion, at this point in history, 3rd edition knew exactly what they were talking about. And of course, now we are back to what everybody knows, the lovely 5th edition bard, where it has now been transitioned once again. So give me one second. Once again, I have to mention this because this is something that we haven't seen and I've been waiting to see. This is the thing that I wanted in every history of, is being able to pick out the one thing that changed every single edition. And this is the one that's changed, is the type of magic that they do. We started off with druid spells in 1st edition. We went to wizard spells limited, kind of like a half caster in 2nd edition. Then we got our own bardic spell list in 3rd edition. 4th edition made us have these weird spells that were more about healing. Now 5th edition, what do we get? We get bard as a full caster with an emphasis on the versatility and adaptation. They went back to 3rd edition, gave us what we know as the versatility of bard, but they are now a full caster. Chat, do you understand? This is like the only class that we have found so far. This is the only thing that we've dived into in terms of history that has had that much of a drastic change. The way that their magic works has changed every single edition. This is what I live for. This is the stuff that I love to research and find out, is what was going on with how they were approaching it. And to see something like this is just so enriching for me to understand the approaches that they were trying to do, and see how drastically different they are in terms of how they play. That's what's most fun for me about this. So yes, we are now a full spell casting class with more versatility, getting slightly away from being just primary healer. One thing that I did find interesting though is that 5th edition kept the D8. So instead of doing what every other edition prior to 4th did, which was bring it into the D6 realm as a light fighter, 5th edition said, you know what? Bards can be a medium fighter, and that's what they are. We got a D8 for their hit points, which is pretty good for their durability. I think it's better than what I don't think they should be the same as a mage, right? They're not quite a glass cannon. They're a little bit better. Spellcasting. Now, for the first times, bards have access up to level 9 spells. They are full casters. They progress as normal. The spell list that they have access to is now much broader than any previous edition, covering pretty much everything from utility, control, and support spells. They do prepare spells similarly to sorcerers now. So instead of just having just whatever, they have the same preparation as sorcerers from 5th edition, choosing a limited number of known spells, but they get to cast them spontaneously. So you don't have to have specific ones, but you get a much broader list to choose from. Then you get a certain list to curate, and from there you get to just cast spontaneously. So I think that's the right direction for modern day bards. I think that's correct. I really hope that I still say that 3rd edition was probably doing a lot better with that in terms of the way that, not in terms of the spellcasting. My brain jumped ahead in conversation, but I really like how we're going with this. I think 5th edition is going in the right direction with the ability of magic. I hope that, like 3rd edition, 5th edition continues with the use of a lot of the extra skill sets. That's what I meant, like the individual abilities with music and all of that stuff that they can do. Other than spellcasting, though, we get the all important and much understood bardic inspiration. This is one that everybody knows and loves. It is the most core mechanic of bards that everybody knows about. It allows you to give your ability, your allies, the ability to get bonuses to attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks. And of course, the number is tied to their charisma modifier, and that refreshes on a short rest. And these are just, straight die rolls that they get bonuses to. So again, I'm not as happy with this. I much prefer how 3rd edition broke it out into like courage and heroic actions and things like that. But we're stuck with bardic inspiration. We'll leave it at that. I still think 3rd did it better. We now have expertise. Bards are now able to choose skills in which to gain expertise, either doubling their proficiency or adding multiples. Expertise is doubling the proficiency in a skill that they already know, which makes them unparalleled in skills, but it doesn't make them as versatile as the previous editions, where basically they had access to all skills. This just makes them extremely good. This makes them more of a master than a jack of all trades, to be completely honest. And I don't know if I agree with that. I kind of prefer the jack of all trades over being this master of a few, but they also get the jack of all trades feature, which allows them to add half their proficiency bonus to any ability that they aren't proficient in, or that they don't include their proficiency bonus in already. So it's very weird that they get jack of all trades, but then they get this expertise, which makes them uber, like a little bit more than jack of all trade, in my opinion. But again, it still works. It still works, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the lore behind Bard. It's just not my favorite way that they've done it for all the editions. But they do get a couple extra ones. They still keep Song of Rest, which allows them to recover additional health during short rests, which we've already seen that they can do, which is great. They get something called Magical Secrets, one of the most powerful features, which allows them to learn spells from any other class's spell list. So like we said, they do work like sorcerers, so they have this extremely massive spell list. They can basically cast anybody's spells but they can only have so many that they can pull from at any given time. I think this is one of the best changes that they've done. I fully endorse it. It's kind of similar to the way that I've approached the Bard in the past, especially how I approached it in High Point. Having them have the ultimate access to everything, I think, is the smart move. I think with Magic being so closely tied with music, I think it makes the most sense that they don't have any limits on what Magic area that they have. And of course, they have their own list of subclasses at 3rd level. They can go to, they have their colleges, and then they can kind of, specialize. You have, your lore, your valor, and your glamour subclasses. Of course, we already know about Bardic Inspiration and what it allows you to do. Oh, and I'm sorry, I've been misspeaking. Bardic Inspiration is a D6, not a D4. I just haven't had that on my list yet. But yeah. Still think that I liked the other ways that they used to do the inspiration. I don't like Bardic Inspiration just being kind of this overall thing you can do. I kind of liked how they broke it up as you leveled up and made it more, you got more things to do with it as you got stronger. What else did we get? Counter Charm. Oh, so this is actually a little bit different. Before we talked about Counter Charm as something that they got way later. This one you get Counter Charm at level 6. And 5th edition runs this, where you can use your magic to grant yourselves and allies advantage on saving throws against being frightened or charmed, and it lasts as long as you continue to perform, so kind of like concentration. Now, as nice as this is, I don't think it sounds as good as the previous counter song or counter spell, but I will say that it makes a lot more sense to do it this way at such a lower level, starting at level 6 instead of level 18. So what I would suggest is that this should get upgraded and level up with the player eventually to be able to affect like all verbal magic like the previous one. But for level 6, I think this is well balanced out, just kind of giving you advantages on saving throws against frightened and charmed. That makes sense. I think I would keep that. I just would like it to level up more because I think we're losing such a great ability by making it such a low level. Now, we are talking about Bardic Secrets, and then, of course, you get your 3 subclasses. So you get like College of Lore, which focuses on knowledge and spellcasting abilities. You get things like Cutting Words, almost like Vicious Mockery, where, but no, Cutting Words, which you can use inspiration dice to reduce the enemy's attack roll, ability check, or damage roll. So it's the opposite of Bardic Inspiration from College of Lore, or College of Lore. College of Valor, you have the subclass that emphasizes martial power, so making you more of a fighter, and then allowing you to use inspiration to bolster allies' attacks and defenses. And then if you choose the College of Glamour, which is in Xanthar's Guide of Everything, this one allowed you to focus on abilities to charm and manipulate people through music, with abilities like Mantle of Inspiration. So again, these are more these classes are really leaning into, do you want to buff the party, do you want to debuff the enemy, or do you want to manipulate and control the enemy, which I find fascinating. And that is it. That is the entire history of Bard as we know it. And yeah, I'm really curious what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if you guys are surprised as I was with everything, because yeah, the fact that it changed so much and so often with each edition, and the fact that each one did add a little bit of its own flair to it, a little bit of its own unique personality, and that each one took something of the previous and built upon it. Those are the things that I'm picking up from this history of that I really appreciate about this and think is one of the more fascinating things. And now I'm really wanting to get more into other history of classes. So I think that'll be in our near future, is to check out more of these classes and more about what's been changing. But next time we do one of these deep dives, we are going to look into the history of those prestige classes, because like I said, 1st edition had the precursor, 2nd edition didn't quite do it the same way, and then 3rd edition came around and made it a cornerstone and a core mechanic, and I really want to get into that. So join us next week for that. Also, we will be here on Monday, so join us on Monday for our regularly scheduled review. I believe Kage just posted the item in Discord, so let me pull that up and validate which we are doing. He just updated our schedule. So next Monday, on Monday, we have a new review from the community. We have something from Hecate. Hecate, it is your item. We have the Sorcerer subclass Ice Monarch, the Ice Monarch Sorcerer subclass. So we've actually already reviewed a Shadow Monarch subclass from Hecate. So this one's going to be a little bit more interesting. We're going to be able to do a little bit of side-by-side comparison with that. And we're going to be able to look into what this subclass is going to bring us. And then we are probably going to have a follow-up stream on Thursday, since I will be out next Friday. We will try to do a pop-up stream on Thursday to cover for that one, which we will talk about the history of prestige classes. Kage will be here with me next week, so expect that. And we have another announcement, a very special surprise announcement for everybody next week. Not even Kage himself knows about this announcement. It's going to be an announcement new to everybody. I'm the only one who knows about it. I'm super excited about it. I can wait because I have to wait. I could have announced it today, but I really, really want Kage to be here. And if we can do it on Monday, if the package arrives, we'll be able to do it on Monday, and it'll be fantastic. So don't miss that. Be here on Monday. But you know what? I think I'm going to call it there. I think that's going to be it for me for the rest of the day. Hecate, yes, let's go. Yes, big changes, my dude. I am so excited. Yes, I really want Kage here to be there for it. Not only because it's going to be a big announcement, and I want him to be here. I mean, I say it's a big announcement. It's not like it's not like we became partner or something. No. It's a cool, fun announcement, but it's going to be more of an interaction between all three of us, me, Kage, and you guys chat. So I want everyone to be here. I want to do it all. Wow. Yeah. So I am super, super excited to get to that. And yes, we will be posting some updates about that. Well, we won't be posting updates. We will be doing the update live. This is an update I haven't even told the subs or the VIPs yet in the Discord. So this is going to be pretty fun. I'm excited. It was a project I was able to work on in secret, and I'm really excited with the outcome. So be here next week for that. Again, we're going to hope that it is on Monday, but it may have to be pushed till Thursday. Not trying to bait y'all, but be here next week. Next week's going to be a fun week. It's going to be awesome. But yeah, also let me know in the chat, guys, what you guys thought about today's episode. Were you guys surprised about anything? What did you guys like the most about the Bard history? Which edition do you think did the best? Let me know. Like and subscribe if you did like this episode. You guys know how that works. But otherwise, I'm going to be taking off. So I hope you guys had a great week. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend ahead of you. We will be back on Monday. And I will be back again. We won't be here on next Friday, but we will be here on Thursday. If you like what you saw today and you missed anything and you want to catch it, or if you want to catch any of the previous streams that we've done, you can catch that on our VOD channel on YouTube, which I will drop in the chat right now. And if you want to join our Discord and join our ever-growing community, if you want to give, just sit there, chat with us, chat with other people in the community. If you want to give us suggestions on what to talk about and do these deep dives, if you want to have a history of a topic that you haven't seen yet, or if you want to submit your homebrew for review on Monday, you can do that in our Discord. That link is also in the chat right now. Hecate, thank you so much for being here. Cosmic, I know you were here as well. Thank you so much for showing up. Hecate, we will see both of you on Monday as well. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. I also plan to do some streams, either gaming stream this weekend with some Hitman, but I'm also going to be doing some work in the Misfit Gamers Tavern. I can say that word. So if you guys like that, if you guys saw the other one, we will be continuing on the plaster stone wall or the cave wall. We'll be continuing on that this weekend as well. So join me and come and chat. Otherwise, thank you so much. I'm also excited for your Monday review as well. Hopefully you can contain yourself. Have a great weekend, y'all. Kage will be back, so that'll be a lot of fun and exciting. Hope you guys had a great time. Yeah, cheers, guys.
This mortal form has grown weak. I need sustenance.